He watched her marry a prince on television, tears streaming down his face, 5,000 miles away in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency heart surgery. The father who'd given everything couldn't give her away at the altar. And now, 6 years later, he's fighting for his life again, this time with a blood clot threatening to end it all. The phone hasn't rung. The text hasn't come. The daughter who tells Netflix audiences about connection and family tradition can't seem to connect with the man who made her dreams possible. "I just love having a tree up," she said to cameras, explaining how ornaments tell your family story. But what story do you tell when you've erased half your family from the narrative? For decades, Thomas Markle Senior worked in the shadows of Hollywood, a lighting director who understood that the real magic happened behind the scenes, never in front of the camera. He lit the stars, created the illusions, and saved every dollar to light up his daughter's future. But when that daughter became a star herself, when she married into the most famous family on earth, he was left in the dark. What really happened between a devoted father and his ambitious daughter? What mistakes are so unforgivable that they warrant 6 years of absolute silence? Join us as we uncover the devastating truth behind Hollywood's lighting director and the Duchess who won't return his calls. The news broke quietly on a Thursday afternoon in early December 2024. Thomas Markle Senior, 79 years old, had suffered a massive stroke. Emergency responders rushed him to a Southern California hospital where surgeons worked through the night to remove a dangerous blood clot. By Friday morning, he was in intensive care, his condition listed as critical, his prognosis uncertain. Doctors told his son, Thomas Jr., and daughter Samantha that the next 72 hours would be crucial. The family gathered, making phone calls, updating concerned friends, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. One phone call they didn't make was to Meghan because they knew from 6 years of bitter experience that she wouldn't answer. One person who should have been there, whose absence was glaring and painful, remained in her Montecito mansion, apparently unaware or unconcerned that her father was fighting for his life. The story didn't explode across tabloids immediately. It surfaced first through Samantha Markle's social media, a brief update asking for prayers for their father. Within hours, royal watchers picked it up, and by Saturday, December 7th, major news outlets were running the story. TMZ, Daily Mail, The Sun, all reported the same basic facts. Thomas Markle in intensive care, condition serious. Daughter Meghan apparently silent. Royal commentator Richard Eden wrote on December 8, 2024, "The question isn't whether Meghan knows about her father's condition. She almost certainly does. The question is whether she'll do anything about it. Given the pattern we've seen for 6 years, the silence is telling and deeply troubling. The timing was almost cruelly ironic. Just 3 days earlier, Meghan's Netflix lifestyle show had premiered to disastrous reviews. Critics savaged the 8-episode series for its superficiality, its tone-deaf displays of wealth, and most pointedly, the disconnect between Meghan's on-screen preaching about family and connection versus her off-screen reality of family destruction and disconnection. But this story truly begins not in December 2024, nor even in May 2018 when everything fell apart. It begins in 1981 in Los Angeles, when Thomas Wayne Markle Sr. held his newborn daughter for the first time and made an unspoken promise that he would give her every opportunity he never had. Born in Newport, Pennsylvania in July 1945, Thomas grew up in modest circumstances, the kind of American childhood where you learned the value of hard work because you saw your parents sacrifice daily just to keep the lights on. He didn't dream of Hollywood glamour. He dreamed of stability, of mastering a craft, of being good at something that mattered. Television production became that something. By his mid-20s, Thomas had worked his way into Hollywood's technical crew world, starting at the bottom, learning lighting from veterans who'd been doing it since the industry's golden age. Lighting direction doesn't get the glory. The actors get applause, directors get awards, writers get credited. But lighting directors create the mood, the atmosphere, the visual truth of what audiences see. Thomas was exceptional at it. Colleagues remember, someone who understood that shadows were as important as light, that you could tell a story with contrast and color before a single line of dialogue was spoken. His career flourished through the 70s and 80s, working on shows that became cultural touchstones. General Hospital during its Luke and Laura peak years. Married with Children when it was redefining sitcom boundaries. The Facts of Life teaching a generation about growing up. Thomas Markle was there for hundreds of episodes, thousands of hours, creating the look that made those shows memorable. The work was steady, the pay was good, and when his daughter Rachel Meghan was born on August 4th, 1981, he had the financial security to give her advantages he'd only dreamed of as a child. Colleagues from those years paint a consistent picture. Thomas was a devoted father, almost obsessively so when it came to Meghan. He would bring her to set, even as a toddler, showing her the magic of television production. A former production assistant, speaking anonymously, recalled, "Tom would be setting up a complicated lighting sequence, very technical, very demanding, and little Meghan would be sitting in a director's chair nearby, just watching. He'd explain things to her, even though she was maybe 5 or 6 years old, couldn't possibly understand, but he was including her in his world, making her part of it." By the time Meghan was in elementary school, Thomas had enrolled her in private school, a decision that strained his budget significantly but never wavered in his commitment. Other crew members drove modest cars and lived in affordable neighborhoods. Thomas did the same, funneling every extra dollar into his daughter's education and opportunities. He wanted doors open for her that had been closed for him. The anecdotes from Meghan's childhood reveal a relationship built on genuine affection and mutual respect. When Meghan was 11 years old, she wrote to Procter & Gamble complaining about a sexist dish soap commercial. The company changed the ad. Thomas kept every newspaper clipping about his daughter's activism, showing them to anyone who would look. "That's my girl," he'd say proudly. "She's going to change the world." He believed it completely. Another story, recounted by Thomas's brother Frederick, involved a father-daughter camping trip when Meghan was 13. "Tom borrowed camping gear because he'd never been camping in his life," Frederick recalled. "But Meghan wanted to go, so he figured it out. They came back muddy and exhausted, and Tom said it was one of the best weekends of his life. Just him and Meghan, talking under the stars about her dreams, her fears, everything. That's who Tom was with her, completely present, completely devoted." As Meghan grew older and more beautiful, as her acting ambitions solidified, Thomas used every connection he had to help her. He got her small roles, introduced her to agents, taught her the business side of Hollywood that destroys so many talented people. When she attended Northwestern University, graduating in 2003 with a degree in theater and international studies, Thomas was there in the audience, recording every moment. A fellow parent from that graduation remembered him. He was the loudest person cheering when Meghan's name was called. You couldn't miss him. He was so proud he was practically glowing. After graduation, as Meghan struggled through the typical early career actor experience, auditioning constantly, getting rejected repeatedly, taking whatever work she could find, Thomas remained her biggest supporter. Phone calls every few days, encouraging her, reminding her that success takes time, that her talent would be recognized eventually. When Meghan landed the role on Suits in 2011, Thomas was one of the first people she called. The show, filming in Toronto, meant distance between them, but they stayed connected. Regular phone calls, text messages about her experiences on set, occasional visits when Meghan flew back to Los Angeles. By this point, Thomas had semi-retired from active production work, living on his pension and savings in Rosarito, Mexico, where the lower cost of living allowed him to stretch his money further. The choice was practical, not extravagant. Thomas had never been extravagant. Even at the peak of his earning years, he'd lived modestly, saving for Meghan's future, for emergencies, for the day when the work would dry up, as it inevitably does in Hollywood for technical crew as they age. Throughout Meghan's years on Suits, from 2011 to 2017, father and daughter maintained what appeared to be a warm, loving relationship. They didn't see each other constantly. The distance made that difficult, but the emotional connection seemed solid. Meghan spoke fondly of her father in early interviews, crediting him with teaching her about hard work and dedication. But was their relationship really as solid as it appeared? Or were there cracks forming, invisible to outsiders, that would eventually shatter everything? Let's take a closer look at what changed when a prince entered the picture and turned a father-daughter relationship into tabloid fodder. The exact date when Meghan Markle met Prince Harry remains somewhat mysterious, with various sources claiming different timelines, but what's clear is that by summer 2016, they were dating seriously. The relationship became public in October 2016 when news outlets confirmed that the world's most eligible bachelor was involved with an American actress. For Meghan, this was both a dream come true and the beginning of a nightmare. The British tabloid press, notorious for its ruthless coverage of royal relationships, descended on every aspect of her life with unprecedented ferocity. This is where Thomas Markle's story intersects with forces he couldn't possibly have anticipated or understood. Suddenly, at 71 years old, retired and living quietly in Mexico, he was being hunted by photographers. They camped outside his home. They followed him to the grocery store. They offered him enormous sums of money for interviews, for photos, for anything that would satisfy public hunger for details about this woman who'd captured Prince Harry's heart. The pressure was relentless and disorienting. Thomas had spent his entire career behind the camera, invisible to audiences. Now he was the subject, and he didn't know how to handle it. Palace officials reportedly offered guidance, suggesting Thomas avoid all media contact, ignore photographers, essentially become invisible. But that advice, while sound for someone trained in royal protocol, was nearly impossible for a regular person to follow when you have telephoto lenses pointed at you every time you step outside. The staged photo scandal emerged from this pressure cooker environment. In May 2018, just days before the royal wedding, it was revealed that Thomas had cooperated with a photographer to stage supposedly candid images. The photos showed Thomas reading about Britain in a coffee shop, looking at pictures of Harry and Meghan on a computer, measuring for a suit. They were sold to tabloids for tens of thousands of pounds. When the staging was exposed on May 14, 2018, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Palace officials were reportedly furious at the deception. The British press, which had been played for fools, turned vicious. And Meghan, in the final stressful days before her wedding, had to deal with this massive embarrassment from the person who was supposed to walk her down the aisle. Thomas released a statement that same day. "I meant no harm. I was trying to present myself better after weeks of terrible paparazzi photos. I see now it was wrong, and I apologize to Meghan, to Harry, and to the royal family." Then came the heart attack that changed everything. On May 15, 2018, Thomas was hospitalized in Tijuana, Mexico with cardiac symptoms. He underwent surgery to insert stents, a procedure that doctors said saved his life but also made travel medically inadvisable for several weeks. The timing was devastating. 4 days before the wedding, what followed was a very public back and forth that should have remained private. Thomas initially told media he wouldn't attend the wedding due to health concerns. Then he said he would try to attend anyway. Then he confirmed he couldn't travel. Text messages between Thomas and Meghan, later revealed through various sources, showed increasing tension. Meghan reportedly urged her father to stop talking to the press, to follow palace protocol. Thomas felt he was being blamed for problems he hadn't created, punished for trying to defend himself against unflattering coverage. May 19, 2018, Windsor Castle, St. George's Chapel. The world watched as Meghan Markle, stunning in her wedding gown, walked down the aisle to marry Prince Harry. The ceremony was beautiful, the couple radiant, the spectacle unforgettable. Prince Charles stepped in graciously to escort Meghan partway down the aisle, a gesture praised as kind and fatherly. But in Rosarito, Thomas Markle watched on television, still recovering, his chest aching, his heart breaking for reasons that had nothing to do with cardiac surgery. He watched his daughter marry without him, the culmination of every sacrifice he'd made rendered meaningless by a mistake he'd tried desperately to apologize for and a health crisis beyond his control. In an interview days later, Thomas told Good Morning Britain on June 18, 2018, "Watching her walk down that aisle was the most beautiful and painful moment of my life. I was so proud of her, but I was devastated I couldn't be there. I kept thinking about all the times I'd imagined that moment, walking my daughter to her husband, and it didn't happen because I made one terrible mistake." The aftermath of the wedding marked the beginning of the estrangement that continues to this day. Thomas reported that communication with Meghan effectively ceased after the wedding. His calls went to voicemail. His texts received no response. He tried reaching out through Doria, Meghan's mother, but was told she wouldn't intervene. He contacted mutual friends who said they couldn't get involved. Palace officials apparently informed him that all communication should cease, that the family wanted privacy and distance. For Thomas, this was incomprehensible. He'd apologized. He'd explained the pressures he was under. He'd had a heart attack, for God's sake. Wasn't that enough? Apparently not. By late summer 2018, desperate to reach his daughter through the only avenue available, Thomas began giving interviews. Each one generated massive headlines and intensified the rift. On July 29, 2018, he told the Daily Mail, "I've been ghosted. That's the only word for it. My own daughter has ghosted me, and I don't understand why I'm not allowed to apologize properly, not allowed to explain, not allowed to be forgiven." These interviews, while understandable from Thomas's perspective, were viewed by many as making the situation worse. Royal protocol experts said he was violating unspoken rules about family privacy. Meghan's supporters argued he was trying to profit from his connection to royalty. But Thomas's defenders pointed out the impossible catch-22 he faced. He was being told not to speak to the media while simultaneously being denied any private channel to communicate with his daughter. What was he supposed to do? Throughout 2019, as Meghan's pregnancy progressed, Thomas made increasingly desperate public pleas. "I want to meet my grandchild," he told The Sun in February 2019. "I want Meghan to know I love her, that I'm sorry, that I deserve a chance to be part of this baby's life." When Archie was born on May 6, 2019, Thomas learned about it through news reports. No call, no text, no personal notification, just the public announcement. The pattern continued through 2020 and into 2021. Harry and Meghan moved to California, ironically putting them closer geographically to Thomas than they'd been since the wedding, but proximity meant nothing. The wall of silence remained impenetrable. Then came the Oprah interview on March 7, 2021, where Meghan spoke about her father in terms that suggested he was dead. "I've lost my father, not estranged from, not speaking to, but lost, as though death had taken him when in reality, her choice had." Thomas responded on March 23, 2021, on Good Morning Britain, "I haven't died. I'm still here. I'm still her father. She's grieving someone who's alive and desperate to talk to her. How is that fair?" Royal biographer Tom Bauer, who extensively researched the Markle family for his book released in 2022, offered this assessment. Thomas Markle made mistakes, but they were human mistakes made under inhuman pressure. The punishment he's received, total excommunication from his daughter's life, seems grotesquely disproportionate. Meanwhile, Meghan has built a brand on compassion and authenticity while demonstrating neither to her own father. From 2021 through 2024, the situation remained frozen. Thomas continued speaking out occasionally, each interview generating fresh headlines and renewed debate. He revealed he'd written letters that went unanswered, sent gifts to Archie and later Lilibet that were never acknowledged, tried every conceivable avenue to reconnect. Nothing worked. His health continued deteriorating. More heart procedures, mobility issues, the inevitable decline of an aging body stressed by emotional pain as much as physical ailments. Friends reported that the estrangement consumed him, that he talked constantly about Meghan, about his grandchildren he'd never met, about mistakes he couldn't undo and apologies that wouldn't be accepted. By late 2024, Thomas was 79 years old, frail, and running out of time. And then came the stroke. December 5, 2024. Emergency surgery, intensive care, critical condition. The crisis that might finally force a reckoning or might end with a father dying without reconciliation. Sources close to the Markle family reported that both Samantha and Thomas Jr. tried reaching Meghan when their father's condition became critical. They called, emailed, even attempted to reach out through mutual acquaintances. Nothing. The Sussex camp remained silent, offering no comment, no acknowledgement, no indication that Meghan even knew or cared. Royal commentator Angela Levin, who'd interviewed Harry extensively for her biography, commented on December 8, 2024. If Thomas Markle dies without Meghan reaching out, that silence will define her legacy forever. You cannot come back from letting your father die alone after years of begging for forgiveness. No amount of charity work or humanitarian posturing will erase that stain. The contrast between Meghan's public image and private actions reached peak absurdity with the release of her Netflix show just days before her father's medical crisis. Episode after episode featured Meghan speaking about connection, tradition, and family. "The holidays are about finding time to connect with the people we love," she said earnestly. But apparently, the people she loved didn't include her father. Critics were savage in pointing out this disconnect. One review noted, "Watching Meghan Markle explain the emotional significance of Christmas ornaments while her father lies in intensive care is a masterclass in cognitive dissonance." Another wrote, "She can spend an hour teaching strangers how to fold paper for Christmas crackers, but she can't spend 5 minutes calling her dying father. The cruelty is breathtaking." Social media erupted with similar sentiments, many pointing out that if Meghan could find time to film 8 episodes of lifestyle content, surely she could find time for one phone call to the man who'd raised her. The silence from Montecito as Thomas fought for his life spoke volumes about priorities and character. Whatever legitimate grievances Meghan might have, whatever pain the staged photos and subsequent interviews caused, the proportional response to a dying father isn't continued silence. It's a phone call. It's showing up. It's recognizing that death is permanent and estrangements shouldn't be. Royal expert Phil Dampier told The Sun on December 9, 2024, "This is Meghan's last chance. If she doesn't reach out now, if Thomas dies without hearing from his daughter, the world will judge her harshly, and rightly so. Some wounds heal with time, some only deepen. This one is about to become permanent." The question haunting everyone watching this tragedy unfold was simple. Would Meghan make a last-minute, face-saving call? Would she finally break her silence, not out of genuine compassion, but because letting her father die without contact would be public relations suicide? And if she did call, would it matter? Would it mean anything? Or would it just be damage control? Too little and far too late. Even in his absence from Meghan's life, Thomas Markle's presence loomed large over her narrative. Every project she launched, every interview she gave, every cause she championed was viewed through the lens of her treatment of her father. The voice of critics, biographers, and royal watchers consistently raised the same point. Authenticity requires consistency. You cannot be authentic about some relationships while being calculatedly cold about others. You cannot preach compassion while denying it to your own parent. You cannot build a brand on truth while living a lie about your family. The disconnect was too obvious, too glaring to ignore. Thomas's legacy, regardless of how long he lives or what happens next, is already established in many minds. He's the devoted father who sacrificed everything for his daughter's dreams, who made one mistake under impossible pressure, who apologized repeatedly and was never forgiven. He's the cautionary tale about what happens when you love someone who values image over substance, ambition over loyalty. Will Meghan's legacy be defined by this estrangement? Absolutely. Future historians writing about her time in the royal family, her marriage to Harry, her post-royal career, will dedicate significant space to the Thomas Markle story. Not because it's sensational, though it certainly is, but because it's revealing. It shows who she is when the cameras aren't rolling, when the PR team isn't scripting her responses, when real human emotion and messy family dynamics require more than a polished statement. And what it reveals isn't flattering. It reveals someone who can discard people who no longer serve her narrative, who can maintain absolute silence in the face of desperate pleas from a parent, who can preach values she clearly doesn't practice. That revelation will outlive any Netflix show, any humanitarian award, any carefully curated public appearance. The broader implications extend beyond just Meghan's reputation. This story raises fundamental questions about modern celebrity culture, about the price of ambition, about what we're willing to sacrifice to maintain an image. Thomas Markle didn't ask to be part of this story. He was pulled into it by virtue of being Meghan's father, and when he didn't handle the pressure perfectly, when he made very human mistakes, he was discarded. The message that sends is chilling. If you're not useful, If you're not perfect, if you're not willing to disappear quietly, you'll be erased. That's not compassion. That's not growth. That's not the modern, authentic, emotionally intelligent approach to life that Meghan claims to embody. It's cold calculation dressed up in warm language, and people see through it. As Thomas Markle Senior lay in that hospital bed in early December 2024, surrounded by beeping machines and worried medical staff, but not by his daughter, the world waited. Would she come? Would she call? Would she show even a fraction of the humanity she broadcasts so constantly? Or would the silence continue, proving once and for all that the gap between Meghan's public persona and private character is unbridgeable? The answer, whatever it turns out to be, will define both of them forever. Thomas as either the father who died estranged or the father whose daughter found compassion at the last moment. Meghan as either the daughter who couldn't forgive or the daughter who finally did. But even if reconciliation comes now, at this late hour, under these extreme circumstances, the question will remain, what kind of person waits until their father is dying to show basic human decency? What kind of daughter needs a deathbed to remember she has a father? The story of Thomas Markle and Meghan Markle is ultimately a story about priorities. What matters more? Protecting your image or healing your family? Maintaining control of your narrative or acknowledging uncomfortable truths? Winning a public relations battle or winning back a relationship that, once lost, can never truly be restored? Meghan made her choice years ago when she stopped answering the phone, stopped reading the texts, stopped acknowledging that her father existed except as an embarrassing chapter in her origin story. That choice has consequences, and those consequences are playing out now in intensive care in Southern California, where an elderly man fights for his life while his daughter remains silent in her mansion, surrounded by ornaments that supposedly tell her family's story, except they don't tell the whole story. They only tell the parts she wants people to see. What do you think? Should Meghan reach out to her father, or has too much damage been done? If you were in her position, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind the royal headlines, the ones that reveal character in ways no PR team can spin.